Hey everyone, this is Alex Tuck from Tuck Consulting Group. Thanks for joining us for another LinkedIn Live. We are here with three awesome guests, Galanda Brooker, Alex Morgan, and Martin Quat. And we're here to talk about business process mapping and how it can help you improve some efficiencies across your company and save you time and money. And we also talk about some practical ways that you can implement some of those changes using different tools. So let's go around. My name's Alex Tuck, and I'm the founder and managing principal of Tuck Consulting Group. Alex Morgan, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Sure, thanks, Alex. Happy to be here. I'm Alex Morgan. I'm a project manager in Vermont, but I also lead our IT professional services practice at Tuck Consulting. I'm a certified ClickUp expert, and I love witnessing business process mapping.
Awesome, thanks. And Galanda, why don't you go next?
Good morning, everyone. My name is Galanda Brooker, and I am based out of Maryland. I'm a ClickUp solutions expert, also a project manager, and I love taking your business processes and automating them to make your work life more efficient and transparent.
All right, Martin, you go next.
Yes, hello everyone. Great to be here with you. Again, my name is Martin Quat. I'm in Vermont. And I am the business process consultant. Had the pleasure of working with Galanda and Alex on a number of clients, and it's been exciting to see how the theoretical turns into the practical. So great to be here with you.
60-person project management consultancy, all based in the US. And part of project management is running the actual project. But some of the adjacent things that happen around project management include getting that project management tool in place with all the right processes and automations to save you time. And it also means that we can take a look at your entire business and figure out what's the most efficient way to implement your projects, your operations, to get the most value out of your investments. And so today, I just wanted to start out, Martin, since we're talking business process mapping, for those of the folks that are attending who aren't familiar with business process mapping, can you give us like a 2-minute overview of what does business process mapping look like when they work with you?
Sure, absolutely. It really starts at the leadership level, where it's been recognized that there is an opportunity or a challenge or a change of some sort to sponsor the organization to say, hey, we need to undergo an understanding of what we do and how we do it. And with that, there's a recognition of various stakeholders, typically a champion of the project, who will then will work with, and we'll start to work with team members, and we'll do interviews, and we'll review documents that may have previously been created. And we'll take all of that information and we'll synthesize it into a mapping of the particular issue at play, or particular process or series of processes. And these processes are always, they don't stand necessarily by themselves. They're associated with one another, kind of like a branching tree, where one thing leads to another, often from a higher level with less detail to a more detailed type of business process that starts to look at each individual component and how they're connected together and who is responsible for that particular part of the process. So we go through an iterative sessions where we draft based on our understanding, and then that draft we review collectively and we make modifications, getting it to the point of acceptance and understanding by the organization or the team that we're working with.
Awesome. Thanks, Martin. And I like to joke, the pieces that you put together are almost a work of art more than they are the science of showing the processes. And what we can do is we can, after the session, we can share some examples so that people can see what the before and after looks like in the comments. We lost Galanda for a second, but she's coming back in. A couple technical difficulties. But while we're waiting for her, I'd love to hear quick fire question. What's your favorite mapping tool and why? Alex, I'd love to hear your thoughts first.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I'll be a shill for ClickUp as a platform I use a lot, and I really like the integration of it. It does have a built-in whiteboarding tool, and I found there are many tools that do similar things. Miro integrates well with ClickUp and other tools as well, and it's probably a little more intuitive and easy to use, and a little more fully fleshed out. But one of the benefits of using the built-in tool in ClickUp when I'm already managing projects and processes there is you can easily convert. Let's say you make a diagram box to say this task is part of a process. You can easily convert that into a step in an actual process you would be using later on. But usually I find the map itself can be built in whatever interchangeable fashion you like, and the information on it is what's key. There are conveniences and benefits of different tools for sure, but I think whatever helps you get the job done faster, because mapping the work out really provides a lot of additional value after the fact, no matter what you're doing with them.
Awesome. Thanks, Alex. Galanda, welcome back. The quick fire question was, what's your favorite mapping tool and why?
Ooh, favorite mapping tool? I really don't have a favorite mapping tool, actually. It's really the process, right? What you get out of the tool, that's where the value add is. So no matter what the tool, like Alex said, being able to have a clear understanding of the steps within your organizational process is really where you find the value. So any tool works great for me. I'm fine with any of them, but the outcome is really what I'm looking for.
Ooh, nice response there. I agree. All right, Martin, I don't need to ask you, but for the audience, I will. What's your favorite mapping tool and why?
Easy, Microsoft Visio. Why? Because I know it well. I agree with the idea that any output is going to be helpful. The however for me is the discipline around the business process mapping. And what I like about Visio more than some of the other tools is that it forces a sense of templating and understanding how things are connected together so they can be archived in a way that's really meaningful collectively. And sure, you can do that with other tools as well. But when you go into Miro, sometimes you get these really long, drawn out views that are difficult to either print or to put into a quick, easy format. And I do like the discipline that comes with Visio, but that tends to be my personality anyway.
Yeah, for sure. So we talked a lot about the theoretical, right? We talked about the tools. Martin, you took us through the process at a high level. Hey, we get our leaders in place, understand what the company, how the company operates, then get the people that actually do the work in a room, and then you start to map all that stuff out and put your swim lanes up there, and this person does this and this person does that. That all sounds interesting, and for someone that's never been through that process before, seems pretty ambiguous. So let's talk a little bit more with specific concrete examples, just to give people an idea of like the types of processes that they could map and sort of the value that they can get from that. So let me pose you a question. So Martin, if you could give a couple of examples that we've had over the past year of some clients and the work that we did with them, maybe starting with CCL as an example.
Sure, happy to. So CCL was a great example of an organization that recognized that they had just undergone a huge internal and external change related to COVID. And they recognized they had staffing changes and they had delivery changes. And there were so many things that were happening dynamically that they were reacting to rather than planning for. And so we worked with them to say, hey, let's understand what you are actually doing, how you are doing it, and who is responsible at each moment in time. For them, role clarity was a very, very, very important aspect of this. And what we started to find in working through each team, we interviewed all the teams that were involved in this one group. And then through that, we started to identify what are the commonalities, where are the gaps, where are the barriers. And it was very fascinating because what we ultimately were able to determine is that people were either not performing certain functions, or there were tools that were not really working to their satisfaction to enable some of these processes to continue forward. In some cases, there were positions that were just missing. So there were gaps of people who would actually handle a specific process to move it forward, all of which created these barriers with and enabling or requiring multiple people to work simultaneously on each of these processes at the same time. So huge duplication of effort and much frustration. And so at the end, we were able to tie all these processes together. We were able to get group buy-in, which is the most important aspect of all of this. Because at the end of the day, you need to have people come to agreement to say, yes, we agree that this is what it should be and how it should function. And through that, we developed role clarifications. And those role clarifications, ultimately, these quick sheets of, hey, what is my job from day in and day out, became a wonderful training tool. And they did ultimately create several new positions. And they use this tool for new hires. And I think ultimately served them well.
That's great.
In the case of St.
Oh, no,
Any
before
questions?
you hop into there. Yeah, we actually got a question from the audience, and I thought it would be really helpful to give the context there. So one of the questions, Martin, was like, how many people or stakeholders in an org should be actively involved in the process mapping? I think, we could think about CCL. How many folks were involved there?
Yeah, we had ultimately there were probably 40 different people that were involved, but it was at different points in time. And so the important aspect of this work is for leadership not only to sponsor it, but for leadership to also help prioritize with staff what are the important areas or to focus on, right? And so at the point of trying to define those priorities, it tends to be a smaller group, often leadership, trying to define what we should really be working on, but then broadening it to the larger group to have input as to some of the specifics and some of the details that may not necessarily be understood by leadership that become important in how we decide to move forward. So it's ultimately everyone in the organization is going to be impacted. So I would say everyone is going to be involved. It's just a question of at what stage in the process development it's.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks, Martin. And I heard you start to mention St. Michael's College. So why don't we go there first? Can you? I'd love for you to tell us about what we did there. But how many people were involved in that process? I know it's a very different group.
So interesting. St. Michael's College. There were two people involved. So completely different. However, also a completely different need. In the case of St. Michael's College, it was really about the college creating new centers of excellence. And one of the directors for the Center of Excellence for the Environment had all of her knowledge in her brain, but no one else knew what that was. And so for us, it was an exercise of extracting that information, but not only just extracting it, having her rethink what it was she was doing, how she was doing it, and how best it applies not only to herself, but to the greater organization. And so it was fascinating to go through that process. Which then Galanda and Alex, continued to pick up on as part of our ClickUp implementation. But it was to have her articulate the needs and the desires of the organization really required pulling out from her and eliciting what it is ultimately they were trying to accomplish at the end of the day and how they were going to achieve that work.
That's awesome. Thanks, Martin. Yeah, and I mean, I know that St. Michael's was working with multiple colleges outside and universities outside of St. Mike's and different departments within the organization. And so even though it was only these two people, it impacted probably hundreds of people as collaborators, right? So very
Exactly
very
true.
fun. And so Martin just alluded to this, Galanda. You've been on the receiving end of some of Martin's business process mapping work. Can you talk me through the process that you and Martin do together, where you take that work that he's done, that he's flipped over the fence, and then you take that as a ClickUp implementer, you take that and implement it for the client?
Exactly. So the value add for me as the implementer is that a lot of the details and the kinks get worked out through the business process step, right? There are cases where a client wants to implement, but they haven't fully thought through the process, or like Martin alluded to, one or two people have a lot of the steps in their brain and didn't even realize that another group needs to do something. And so as the implementer, it really gives me the opportunity to maximize the tool because I have more of the steps laid out at the beginning. Still, ultimately, you may find a few steps that didn't quite get all the way fleshed out, but it's such a much smaller number when you have that step to do the business process beforehand. So you really get to maximize whatever tool you use, whether it's ClickUp or something else, when you have those business process maps done beforehand and really can see how the tool can help them be more efficient.
That's so helpful. Yeah, I think, Galanda, we've seen this a lot. Sometimes we have to jump in and start building right away, right?
Mhm.
And we need to take that first step. The most important step is planning, right? And thinking about,
Yes,
like, what are we actually doing here? Um,
exactly.
yeah, Alex Morgan, when we don't get the opportunity to have Martin involved, right? And we do have to do what I like to call it BPM light, right? So when we don't get the extra, 8 to 10 hours for Martin to do his magic, how do you handle that when you're doing these ClickUp implementations?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a different approach. It tends to be, I think of it as it's more about efficiency of the process. And most of our work, as consultants, we are often on billable hours arrangements. So every way we use our hours is going to cost, it's part of the package. Typically, the most efficient way for us to do this or do an implementation or something like that is to know the plan or the roadmap of it, the process map beforehand, so we can think about it and think holistically about how to kind of set up that solution. If we're starting without a designated map, obviously we need some degree of information from a client first, and we'll do kind of interviews and light versions discovery to get close to that same level of granularity, but not with kind of building it in a map and in a long-term referential way that you can use as an artifact for the future. Still ultimately building a process with them, but I think that the risks inherent in, I wouldn't say it's winging it, but kind of the lighter version, the risks inherent in that are you're not spending as much time talking to all the stakeholders that are involved to get really the perspectives of people who may not be part of that initial discovery. And it's very liable to find out halfway through the process, oh, this entire portion of the work is not covered here because we didn't talk to that person or because they didn't think it was relevant. And usually in cases like that, you end up having to backtrack, retool things a little bit. And it's really ultimately a risk of using your hours less efficiently than you could, getting less done with the same amount of time versus designating that time up front, getting all the right people in conversations so that you can make sure, hey, this person said this element, did we cover this in another interview already, or do I need to touch on that? And getting as holistic, comprehensive as you can up front. And then obviously you dig into the weeds a little bit further with the the more technical stakeholders or whatnot as you start doing it. But understanding that starting point and that ultimate kind of map of what you're trying to do on both sides, client side for them and for us, makes everything go much smoother.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks, Alex. Really appreciate that. We have another question from the audience, and if you are attending and you do have other questions, feel free to just drop them in the comments, and then we'll get those questions answered if we can, if we have time. And Andrew, this one comes from Andrew. Not to generalize too much, but how long does business process mapping project typically take? Right, and that is a generalization for sure. But Martin, I'd love, for you to give a couple of examples of, like, I think CCL is a great long example, and and then more of a typical example for some of our ClickUp implementations would be great.
Sure, happy to. Really great question, and the range is pretty significant. So I'll use the state of Vermont, which the process mapping probably took about 5 years just to do one particular organization within the state of Vermont. And that was with a team of people actually doing that work. So that was a incredibly rich and deep detail that was necessary to follow a lot of the regulations and rules for Medicaid in particular, but very intense. And then we'll do CCL again for one division within the organization. That took about 1.5 years, beginning to end, although we did the majority of the work, I would say, within 6 months. And then to go back to a question earlier, how many people are involved, as we started to broaden it out to the larger teams for buy-in, that took another period of time. That was probably another 6 months, and then about another 6 months of putting it into usable formats for roles and role clarity. And then more simply, going to St. Michael's College, I think we did that work in 2 weeks, something of that nature. It was very fast, very quick, with a very defined purpose, where we outlined, based on our statement of work with them, where several specific processes were identified. But for them, it was important to understand where those processes kind of hung on the tree of all processes within the organization. And so we kind of went backward to go from a more micro level to a much larger macro level to tie them together. But we did that within, I think it was 2 weeks.
Yeah, I think you're right, Martin. That was a pretty quick one. And that was just a testament to the team that we were working with too, right? As a client, making your team available to do the work is just as hard as actually doing the work, right? And getting everyone into the room together, right?
It's the commitment. That leadership commitment is front and foremost for all of this to be successful. And I then would say the buy-in from the team. So the work that you do together and collectively needs to make sense, needs to resound with the team that you're working with. So it goes hand in hand.
Yeah. And I'm sure that, thanks, Andrew, for that question, by the way. I'm sure, like, Alex, you were also on the St. Michael's engagement, and you heard some of the feedback from Martin's process. I'd love to hear, what did Kristen think was like some of the biggest benefits that were gained there?
Yeah, of course. That was a good opportunity for me as someone who's not the expert in the process, but I got to witness, the interactions with Martin and kind of the interviews, and seeing kind of as it happened, and then the product of it afterwards, as Galanda and I continued to implement that work with her. So I'd say during the actual interviews, during the kind of the process of mapping with them, maybe I don't think it's unique to this organization, but it's probably more common with us, an organization that is, or a team that is smaller or more busy, stress, things like that, which, nonprofit, small businesses, pretty common, of course. But we could see the relief on her face just sitting down to talk to us, because she was finally able to carve out time to think about what she has been doing, where they're going, what their goals are, the things that would be just always critical to understand and have in the back of your head all the time. And if you're moving a mile a minute, it's hard to even spend time to do that. So one kind of just the nature of forcing yourself to sit down and write down your processes to understand your own systems, your own gaps. They were certainly invaluable, information that they gained just from doing it, not even implementing it afterwards. But then having that map for the future, we can build something concrete with her afterwards and say, this is what we're referring to. We can dig into questions. We can, adjust if we need to, of course. But ultimately, we have a map that is telling us where to go, and we know if we're moving in the right direction or not, or if we need to change things. And then we kind of, maybe you do one component of that map first, and that's, it could be a month or two process. But we know exactly where we can pick up after that as well. So one of the bigger benefits I think that they're seeing is, they want to do this for the rest of the organization, which I think is great because it can clearly benefit them a lot. But we can start and stop. We can do things in chunks. Or even if you say we have an engagement and now we're done with the engagement, where do we go from here? Well, it's already been mapped out for us. We can say, do you have the budget for this now? Do you need to wait on this? Do you have the time capacity to do this now? Understanding where that is, it just makes the whole planning process and for your own sake, budgeting and that sort of aspect of the planning process a lot easier for you, and just really instant alignment because we have it written down and we know what we're trying to do.
Yeah, exactly. And it's funny, I think out of that, Kristen actually showed the process maps to the president of the university or the college, and he also is interested in doing that across the entire org, which is a great testament to the work that you did, Martin. Just to give a little, like, I love to paint a picture because, again, I still feel like, sometimes it can just be a little bit ambiguous, right? Like, what is business process mapping? Galanda, can you help us out? Like, can you give us some examples of a couple of process flows that you implemented, maybe for like some nonprofit flows that Martin built out ahead of time?
Sure. I'd actually like to share one that I did recently where the business process flow was done prior to us coming in with a organization that does humanitarian aid. So part of their process was to evaluate folks who wanted to give donations and then evaluate that across, it's a global organization. So because I had their process maps, I was able to build some workflows based on the process maps, and actually, I think save some time for them in meeting times because I can get a lot of information from the business process maps, and then was able to just ask very specific pointed questions in the implementation of their process of evaluating possible donations and then processing those donations to delivery. So that's one that I did really recently that was extremely helpful. One of the ones that we did for a nonprofit was for their events, right? So they're doing events for the community and deciding, okay, when do we need to evaluate? What supplies do we need? Who needs to know next? Who does that sort of thing? So event planning, so to speak, is another business process mapping that was really helpful in having those steps written out ahead of time to be able to then automate that within the system, help with the transparency and the notifications and accountability all along the process leading up and then to the event.
Awesome. Great. Thanks. That's a great example, Galanda. And another success. Love it. We actually got another question from Jackie in the audience. Once a new business process is live, what's the best way to ensure adoption? Alex, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, sure. I think in cases like this, we're mapping, we're working with their team to identify where they are now, what they're doing now, and what they're trying to do. So if there's gaps in that process, then we're identifying, here are the things that you need to start incorporating. Usually, because we're already interviewing the people that are doing the work and that are overseeing the work, we should understand, what really the ins and outs of how they like to work. And there isn't a lot of necessarily change management going into that process because it's current state for the most part. And if there's a gap, if there's a thing we need to identify as a room for improvement, the need for that improvement is coming from the stakeholders. They're saying, here's a pain point we have, let's fix it. Not, I don't want to start doing it this other way. So on the process map side, that part it's kind of built in. The adoption, the desire to adopt it comes out of those interviews because you're guiding them along a path towards making their lives easier and just letting them understand things. Implementing it, if it's connected to the process map, I would say if someone came in and said, we made a map, can you go do this for me in some other tool? And they've never used the tool before, that's a potential hurdle, of course, because there's a lot of change management there. You might have to drive the reasoning and the value of that. But in our engagements, we're putting these two things together as a necessary pair to say, we need to understand your process, so do you. When we have all that written down and approved, we can then build it the way you would like to see it. And at that point, we're driving adoption by really hitting the marks on the things that we've said you need to do or you want to do, making it as simple as possible for the team with their current skills and awareness and capacity to continue doing their work, hopefully in a simpler fashion, at the very least, in a way where they know the whole process, know what's going to happen from A to Z. They don't have to think about, do I need to add in some extra steps here, or am I missing something? It's built in. So it just takes away some of that mental headspace necessary to drive work when you haven't planned it out. And then the second part I'd say is just as you are building it, if there are kind of live refining and vetting of what you've done to make sure that this is accurately reflecting what we talked about in the map, or things that maybe you have some additional details that were just too small for the map to include, or for the mapping interviews to include. Are we covering all those here, or are we making it, are we just building a bucket that you check off versus building a series of checks for you to make sure you're doing your work properly? So meeting the team where they're at, I think, is key, but we've already kind of done that from the mapping process.
That is awesome. Thank you so much, Alex. And it looks like we are at time. So I'm going to wrap it up and try to be a project manager here. We're about a minute and a half over. But Alex, thank you so much for your insights. Galanda, thank you. Martin, thank you, as always. This will be available on YouTube, and we'll make sure we'll post it on all of our socials as well. For those of you who weren't able to attend, or those of you that wanted to watch a replay, you can learn more about the organization at tuckconsultinggroup.com. Feel free to book a meeting with us if you have any questions or want to learn more about business process mapping or implementing ClickUp in your organization. Thank you all so much, and have a great day.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye. Thank you, everyone.